Welcome to Let's Talk. Here we will focus on the hustle, the juggle, and everyday struggle of small business. We will be here every week talking to small business owners about their everyday struggles, stresses, and ways they have been able to overcome the challenges of running their business. We welcome questions and comments, so please feel free to email us at admin@PlemonsCPA.com. We hope you enjoy, and above all, we hope it helps. Well, welcome to the hustle, juggle, and struggle of small business. This is Thalia Williams, your co-host today. We have in our studio Chris Hall of Pontum Financial as our host, and we have as our guest a phenomenal attorney by the name of Rebecca Smith of Rebecca Smith Law Firm. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Well, Chris, you're going to go ahead and kick off, so let's go ahead and get started.
Great to have you here today, Rebecca. Thank you so much for spending some time. We know the dynamic for people's lives right now is a little bit different, so it's time consuming and everyone's schedule is all over the place. So we really appreciate you being here.
Well, I appreciate you guys inviting me on board. Absolutely.
Can you maybe start by introducing yourself, just giving us a little bit of background? I had the luxury of and time to read through your website. It's an impressive resume, to say the least. So if you could just share with the audience a little bit about your background, that'd be fantastic.
Certainly. So my name is Rebecca Smith. I am the founder and owner of the Rebecca Smith Law Firm, PLLC. My office is located at 410 in Blanco, but I haven't always been an attorney. I used to be a soldier in the United States Army. And when I was on active duty, I wasn't with JAG. I actually worked in the medical field. When I retired, I went to work for some of the larger corporations here, LabCorp and Quest Diagnostics. And when I had my midlife crisis, instead of buying a Corvette, I went to law school on my GI Bill. So I worked during the day. I had 2 teenage children at home as a single parent and went to law school because I like a challenge. When I graduated from law school, I passed the bar, went to work for a law firm here in town, always knowing that I wanted to open up my own shop. And so after, a couple of years of working for the firm, I hung out my shingle in 2017 and haven't looked back since.
Nice. I really like that. 2 teenagers and law school. Yeah, that was a midlife crisis, girl.
Well, and you have a reduced version or an abridged version of your resume. So as you were going through that resume out, my jaw dropped. So that's quite the midlife crisis. I agree. I'll echo that. So, well, thank you so much for joining us. There are so many different things that I could talk about with you, from, your military background and how you transitioned and used your GI Bill, because living in military cities, Texas, it's there's a lot of that goes on. So a lot of the military personnel that exit, and a lot of my clients have left the military, started their own business, and being able to talk to someone who has been there, done that is paramount. It's one of the best assets that you have on your resume, is that you can talk through those items, those tasks, the different things that you went through, having the experience not only from the professional side of the desk, but also from the consumer side, or the learning side of the desk. So being able to walk people through that. Can you give us some insight into how you did that, how you transitioned from the big firm or working at a firm to what made you decide that you wanted to do that? Because I think it will coincide very well with some of the people that are listening to this podcast.
Certainly. So I have always had that entrepreneurial spirit. My dad was actually active duty as well for 21 years in the United States Army. And I went from, one duty station to another growing up. And when we got stationed at Fort Lee, I noticed at the local, at that time I was in middle school, they didn't have a school store. So I took my allowance and went to the commissary and bought candy and gum and pencils and pens and notebooks, and I opened up my own school store until, that's my first run-in with oppressive regulation. Once the assistant principal found out that I was selling things out of my locker, I got shut down and put in school suspension. But I honestly believe that folks who are in the military We are in some ways have an advantage when it comes to, opening up our own business and being entrepreneurial in that we're very, very mission oriented. And much of our careers that we spend in the military, it's like we understand that, you have to have tasks that need to be completed and how to stay on task and stay on target. And if something doesn't go right, how to do an after action review to figure out, like, why did this thing not work, or how can I do it better the next time? So when I was in law school, I took the classes like, law practice management and marketing of a law firm, as well as, a sundry of other classes. And I always knew that I really loved small businesses. I love helping folks, get their businesses started, help them grow their businesses, buy or sell businesses. And so that's when I finally got out of law school, that's what I looked for. And I did get hired at a medium-sized firm here in town. And, that provided just invaluable experience to me to actually learn how to do the things, to hone my craft, if you will. So when I made the leap, from going from, the comfort of a steady paycheck at a law firm to running my own business, I kind of knew exactly what I was getting into, but nothing prepares you for how many different hats you have to wear. But it's all a very learnable skill. And there's San Antonio has a tremendous entrepreneurship environment here. We have a number of organizations that, are nonprofits that assist, entrepreneurs in figuring out how to effectively run a business and make money at it.
Yes, they do. That is very true in the support that the city of San Antonio offers. It's no reason other than you not willing to put in the effort that you can't be successful with the support here. And that is phenomenal in the sense that you recognize that that support is here and you utilized it. And that's the best part about this.
Well, and one of the aspects.
So here's the tricky bit, though.
It's okay.
I was about to say, here's the tricky bit, though. When I first started out on my own, I didn't realize all the resources that were available through Bexar County, the Small Business Development Center, Bunker Labs, Velocity, even areas at Geekdom. I had no idea that these resources and opportunities existed until, I just by chance wound up opening my office at the Lift Fund Business Incubator business down near downtown when I first started my law firm. And that's how I opened up the Pandora's box of different resources available for small business owners.
Well, it's fascinating too, because a lot of those resources, they're more readily available than maybe they were whenever you started your law firm. But there's always some kind of catalyst with small business owners that I notice. There's a something that I wouldn't say pushes them into it, but definitely a catalyst that makes them make the decision and really kind of creates the clear decision to transition into opening their own shop. And by that time, the lead time that you might want, if you were considering being an entrepreneur, that might be ideal to be able to plan out, have a business plan, go through a pro forma, all those different things that a business owner learns in college, or just by things they need to do. They aren't really available whenever you really pull the trigger on moving forward. So by then time it becomes, a ready, shoot, aim. So as opposed to a ready, aim, fire, it's one of those things where you really have to learn on the job. So what the Power Five really seeks to do is try to educate the business owners on those different professionals that they can surround themselves with, that have the knowledge of those different programs, that know who the resources are and who the people that will be able to provide information as well as guidance on making those decisions. So that's one of the reasons the attorney plays such a major role. Most business owners that I know, they will visit an attorney 2, maybe 3 times in the process, in the sequence of their business or throughout the life of their business. One is maybe through initial entity formation or to get a will done or something along those lines. 2 is if they receive a summons of some sort So, because a lot of business owners are going to face that. And then 3 is, how do I get my will updated after my business is actually valuable? But can you go over some of the different functions that an attorney can really help with, just kind of high level, and then we're going to dig down into them individually one by one, if that's okay. But just from a high level standpoint, I know there are a lot, so maybe focus on, your top, say, 3 or 4.
So absolutely. So I always tell folks that, you want to make sure that when you start your business that you've really thought it through, begin with the end in mind, and avail yourself of all of the information that's out there. And, the internet is an incredible source of information. The problem is not all of it's accurate and not all of it's applicable. So each state is allowed to govern the businesses within the borders of their state. And so, folks need to see attorneys, when they begin their businesses and they're, forming an entity, to make sure that it's structured correctly and they know the things that they need to do to maintain compliance and avoid problems, in the sense that if you don't, conduct your business properly, and God forbid if a lawsuit should come, then you will most likely have your entity disregarded. And they will establish alter ego, and those plaintiffs' attorneys will come after you personally as if you never opened your business.
Yeah, I remember one. The LLC is actually kind of a recent formation, but and not too recent, but from a in a general scope. But I had a client who had an LLC in Texas, and there were other states that still hadn't signed off on how to treat it and the treatment of it, and they owned a business here that did business in other states and owned real estate in other states, and they thought that it was going to be perfectly fine, but they had never consulted with an attorney where the attorney would have gone to maybe to make sure or communicated with another attorney in that state. But it's amazing how much it can vary from state to state. So it was just fascinating to me.
Absolutely. The other thing that I think folks, when they're first getting into business or, running their own shop, that they don't realize is that contracts are essentially, the bone and muscle of all businesses. And so, I call it, they're so busy picking up pennies that they're letting dollars fly out the door. And instead of paying an attorney, to review a contract, they'll just look over it themselves and sign it, not entirely understanding or realizing all of the traps that are in the contract. And the same thing goes with, when they decide to sign a commercial lease, or if they're establishing contracts for themselves, in order to service their clients. And, here in Texas, it's like, we're very much honorable people, and they try to do work on a handshake. And just with, an oral, a man's as good as his word, or a woman's as good as her word. And, that's all we need between us. The problem with those types of contracts is there's misunderstandings, right? So it's not that anyone ever meant to be dishonorable or anyone ever meant to, be deceptive, but two parties can have a conversation, shake hands, and walk away with a completely different idea of, what the scope of work is, what the obligation are, and what the terms of payment are. And when you are able to put those things into a contract, that you have something that's written down, everybody can read it, everybody signs it, everybody's on board with exactly what each party intended, it just simply makes for better business.
That is very true, because those contracts, if you don't have something in writing, the misinterpretation of what you think you heard versus the reality of what they said, all of a sudden now becomes very murky. It becomes extremely unclear. Then the level of expectation is, well, you said you were going to do this. No, that's not what I said. That's what I heard. Oh, yeah. Whereas when it's in writing, it's clear, everybody. And if you don't understand it, you get a dictionary and or thesaurus and you figure it out. But ultimately, everybody knows exactly what is being expected and what is supposed to be delivered.
Well, and the hitch really, it's not just in the verbal cues or the verbal conversation, but now you have so many different communications that are communicating via text message, via email, that are still what, Rebecca might consider a binding agreement, or where a court might consider a binding agreement, but they are still very capable of being misinterpreted. And when a lot of people will ask, why do I need a 10-page document to say something that could be said and agreed upon with a handshake? Well, that's a prime example of why you need to do that, because what's said to you is not received the same way. And people just by nature have everything from body language to verbal language to biases that are present in their conversation, the way they use words, the connotation of those words. So that's where an attorney really comes in handy, because what is said by one is not understood the same way by the other. Same way that I pretty much refuse to have any kind of conversation with my wife via text. So, because it's, if I tell her, or if I ask her, hey,
what's for dinner?
What time are we? Well, what time are we? I always use this as an example, and she can't stand it. So, but whenever I say, what time is the party? For the kids' party on Saturday. Well, it's at 3:00. Well, to me, 3:00 means, okay, I need to be leaving the house by 2:30 so I can arrive at 3. To her, that means we are leaving the house at 3 p.m. to get there. So it's just, and that's a prime example of one of those different, and that's the thing. That's the worst part about it, is that neither one is wrong or right. And the way that the law was written, Rebecca, you could probably confirm this, is that it was written in a way that's flexible enough to be left open to some interpretation and allow for flexibility, but still solid enough to be able to establish guidelines, parameters, and expectations.
Exactly. And then, and a good attorney can, also prevent what we call misinterpretation or ambiguity in a contract as well. So that way, it's very clear as to what the expectation of the parties are and what the obligations of them are. So, other types of contracts that are really important for small business owners are things like non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements. I can't tell you how many times I've had small business owners come up to me and they're like, I met this guy and he had a, networking event, and he seemed really great, and we were both on the same page, and, we talked, and, he ghosted me like 2 weeks ago. I never, he just quit taking my calls, quit responding to me. And then I was driving by, and, he had used my idea. He stole my idea, and he wants to sue him, right? And I'm like, did you have a mutual non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement? Well, no. And it's like, well, he didn't steal your idea. You gifted it to him.
Right.
And you gave him his idea. So and a lot of small business owners don't understand that, even in that pre-contemplation phase, even when you are, you got this idea and it's kind of running around your head, but it hasn't quite come into the world yet. It has not become a reality. Even when you're in that pre-contemplation phase, that as an entrepreneur, and you're kind of trying to work your idea out and solidify, and you're getting information and learning and, trying to figure out if this is going to be a thing for you, you have to be very careful about whom you talk to about your business ideas. And, there's nothing wrong with going into a collaboration with someone, and it can often be very beneficial. The other thing that you have to remember is that anytime that you have conversations with people and you're disclosing this confidential information, if you don't have these contracts in place to protect yourself, well, you're pretty much just letting them take everything that you've really worked hard for, and there's nothing you can do about it, afterwards. These are things that have to be done proactively.
Well, and I'm gonna say something tongue in cheek, so don't throw your hands up in the air and say, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? But so, Rebecca, to that point, why can't I just go online and set up an LLC for my business, or download a non-disclosure agreement and have them sign that at the time, and everything should be fine, right? I mean, that's probably sadly enough. I receive that comment way too frequently for comfort.
So part of the problem, so once again, the internet is an incredible, transformative instrument in our society. Sometimes I think there's almost, it is, especially when it comes to things like legal things. I have seen those types of of contracts that you're talking about. And once again, the problem is number one, they're not very well written. Number two, the big problem is they're not based on Texas law. And so, I've read through them. They're like, well, I had this contract, and it could be a non-disclosure agreement. Sometimes they're company agreements, where they, went online and formed an LLC, and they just, I guess went to some place, and I guess there's like LegalZoom and Rocket Docket and a couple of other online places where you can get those types of contracts. The problem being is you just kind of type in information, you don't really understand what's going on, and you get these papers back and you don't understand what these papers are, what they mean. And what happens is that, they're not a problem until something goes south.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's always the thing.
Everything's great till it ain't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything's great till it ain't. And when it ain't, you take, and you go and you get these documents that you got from wherever, and you bring them to a lawyer, and they're reading through them going, this isn't even based in Texas law. This is an unenforceable contract. Or, when I worked for the law firms, one of our partners put a kid through private college in California on LegalZoom debacles. Because, they'd go to LegalZoom, they wouldn't take the counsel of an attorney. And then all of a sudden everything blows up, and they're like, well, I got this stuff that I got, in the mail, but nobody signed it, or it was written for a single member limited liability company, and there's like 7 members, and nobody transferred the membership legally. And it's just a mess. And, and then you wind up paying a lawyer like buku dollars, like $10,000 or more dollars, trying to figure out this mess. Lawyers are incredibly expensive. So, it's better to be proactive on these things than it is to wait. Texas, I know estate planning too. There's like Susie Orman and LegalZoom and a bunch of other ones that, because everybody's like, well, I need to have a will because, going online's better than nothing, right? Well, no. The problem is Texas. No, exactly. No. So Texas has some very peculiar rules and laws when it comes to the execution of estate planning documents and last wills and testaments and revocable trust and things like that. And in actuality, it can create more problems because if the will is done improperly, now after you're gone, often, your family members have to open up 2 estate procedures, right. One to probate the will that is insufficient, and another is a determination of heirship as if you had died without a will. Right. And, your property and your things wind up going to people that you never intended, not because, you were trying to do the right thing. It's just you went to the wrong place to try to get your documents done at.
Yeah. I always, to go back to the using the online one, I always tell people, well, the one contract that I always say is an excellent agreement to have from LegalZoom or to look at. Probably the best contract on there is a contract that protects them from you suing them if something goes south. So the terms of, the terms that you agree to whenever you pay them. So for no recourse, it's pretty amazing. I said, if that one's 12 pages and the one they're giving you is 3 pages, you should probably know something's not right. And people, I run into this on a personal side and a business side, where people look at their situation and they say, you know what, I don't really have to worry about that. I don't have that much. So from a personal standpoint, or my business isn't that large and I really don't need this. I can just go to, and not to throw CPAs under the bus, but I can have my CPA start the LLC, but they don't get the operating agreement, or they don't get, the articles of incorporation, whatever it may be. But can you explain to us when that becomes important? Because most people think that, my business has to be doing this, or I have to have employees, or, something of that nature. So when is the best time, and what is the best size of your business or estate to be able to do that?
So everyone should, no matter how you're operating your business, you should practice what I call good business habits. I always tell folks, like, number one, begin with the end in mind. So it's not where you're at, but it's where you want to be. Because a lot of times people start off as a sole proprietorship simply because it's, costs nothing and, it's easy to do and there's really no paperwork involved. But the problem comes is when their business starts growing and developing and becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. When they do start that company, they do start like a limited liability company or corporation. Now there's a lot of pain in their life that they could have avoided if they had simply started off in the entity that they knew they needed to be.
A quick add-in, Rebecca, do you find that through that process, whenever they first start out and then they start getting busier and they have pain, do you find that they have more time whenever their business is growing rapidly and they have more pain? So do you find that they have a lot of time to just set aside and sit down with an attorney compared to if they would have done it prior? I just love adding that in there. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Because the biggest thing is you cannot convert that EIN. So when you're operating as a sole proprietor, when you open up a company like an LLC, you have to change your EIN. So if you have to have new bank accounts, you have to open up new lines of credits. If you were paying state sales tax, you're going to have to transfer that. You're going to, pay a CPA a bunch of money to help get all this. If you had equipment, if you had vehicles, everything needs to be transferred over. Because when you operate as a sole proprietor or partnership, you are your business. There's no separation between the two. So when you create that entity, whether it be a limited liability company or corporation, you are creating something separate from yourself. Something that it can own property, it can enter into contracts, it can hire and fire employees, it can pay taxes, it can do everything that a human being can do except for vote.
I can understand that. So in essence, you have more time at the beginning of the process than you do once you get knee deep, ankle deep, knee deep, waist deep. Okay, because that growth is bringing its own pain points. Whereas if you had looked at the end from the beginning, you would have been able to avoid some of that pain point.
Right. Well, and I always like to use this saying, you don't want to climb all the way up this ladder and then find out you propped it against the wrong building.
Or the wrong ladder you're climbing.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that we I would say we hear whenever people are first starting out and we urge them to do this is, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if the business doesn't succeed? Well, then I will have spent all this money up front for nothing. And I tell them, not really, actually, because whenever you're winding up a business and your out is going to be considered, is that correct?
Well, yeah, and everything that they spend on the business is tax deductible.
That's a good point.
So, I always tell folks, does every single person need to be a limited liability company or entity? No. So, I have a friend who lives in Ohio and she's got a great job. She works for a union. She loves her job. She loves the people that she works with. But when her only child moved and left and went to college, she found she had a lot of time on her hands. So she opened up a jewelry business and she, spends her evenings and she does jewelry classes and she sells them and she makes good money selling her jewelry. So she created a little sole proprietorship. She never wants to be James Avery, right? She doesn't have any other employees. She doesn't have any of the huge risk factors that go along with opening a business. She is just delighted to just have this simple little hobby/business. Does she need to be a limited liability company or corporation? No, right? But if you are opening this business you're going to hire employees or you're going to have vehicles, or you're the type of business that carries a lot of liability with it, and when a lawyer says a lot of liability, that means is your, chance of being sued, is different depending on the industry in which you operate. So if you have anything that flies, floats, or rolls associated with your business, your chance of getting sued goes up because accidents happen. If you have employees, your chance of getting sued goes up. If you're producing a product to send into the stream of commerce or for consumption, right, your risk of being sued goes up because you are responsible for whatever you put into that stream of commerce. So, your first and best defense against a lawsuit is always good insurance. So that's why having a good insurance agency and making sure that you are properly insured, depending on the type of business you're in, it's like having a car. If you get into an accident on 410, you don't go hire a lawyer. You just call your insurance company. Well, the same is true of a business owner. If you're in business and something happens and it's a covered claim, you just call your insurance company and they handle it. You don't have to go hire an attorney.
I love it. Thank you, Rebecca. For more information about any of our guests, or if you have questions and comments, please email us at admin@PlemonsCPA.com. And don't forget to check out our website, PlemonsCPA.com, for upcoming events and workshops in San Antonio.
David B Plemons CPA Inc. is providing this podcast as a public service, but it is neither a legal interpretation nor a statement of David B Plemons CPA Inc. policy. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by David B Plemons CPA Inc. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the Hustle, Juggle, and Struggle of Small Business podcast does not imply an endorsement of them or their concepts or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by David B Plemons CPA Inc. employees are those of the employees and do not necessarily reflect the views of David B Plemons CPA Inc. or any of its officials. You should always consult your own investment advisors, attorneys, and accountants before making any decisions concerning your financial matters. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact our office. Chris Hall is a partner with Pontum Financial and offers securities and investment products and services through Waddell & Reed Incorporated, WRI, member FINRA/SIPC. Pontum Financial is a separate entity from WRI. Waddell & Reed is not affiliated with David C. Plemons CPA. Waddell & Reed financial advisors are able to offer insurance products through arrangements Waddell & Reed has made with outside insurance companies. The information presented on this podcast is solely for informational purposes and is not to be constructed as an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to buy any financial product or service mentioned. Any opinions expressed are those of Chris Hall and are subject to change based on market and other conditions. For more detailed information regarding any of the topics discussed on today's podcast, please call 210-625-4845 or visit pontumfinancial.com. Waddell & Reed does not offer tax or legal advice. Please consult with a professional prior to making any financial decisions.